Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. We are entering the final week of the regular season. Thank the Lord. And we will be getting to playoffs starting a week from today. I believe it'll be the 17th that the playoffs will start. I got to get ready.
I heard the 18th, but
well, I mean, I know the last regular season game is Friday, and that's the makeup Columbus Buffalo game. I thought it was the 17th, but okay, if it's the 18th,
it's one of those dates.
It's one of those days. Yes, we're getting close. That's all I can say. We're getting close. But we'll start with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
So we go back to the NFL, where it's basically a league where players go to the highest bidder. It doesn't matter who's recruiting you anymore. It doesn't matter any of those things, because apparently there was a report out there, even I missed it, that Odell Beckham Jr. was going to report to the Jets. He was like in their building. He was going to sign. And all of a sudden you wake up the next day and he's with the Ravens. And it's a deal worth up to $18 million. I was personally happy because I don't want Odell Beckham Jr. anywhere near Aaron Rodgers, because I think with those two volatile personalities, it's a bad mistake. But what's interesting is I just can't believe the Ravens went that deep on him. Well, not even knowing who their quarterback is, even though I'm sure Lamar Jackson will be their quarterback.
Well, no, I mean, that's the thing. I thought, like I said to you, Cav, I thought that the signing of Odell Beckham in Baltimore meant that, okay, the Lamar is going back, but they're saying today that they signed him for $18 million to basically show Lamar that they have weapons, but there's no guarantee Lamar is retracting his demand for a trade. So I don't know.
Yeah, but if nobody wants to pay him that kind of money, he might actually have
to go back to the $32 million and just, he'll have to suffer with that
and roll the dice that he doesn't get hurt again.
Then, don't you think too, Russ and Mike, that given the way that the NFL is, where the players don't have the security blanket or the safety of guaranteed contracts, except for the thing, I feel like you got to take the best.
You do. Absolutely. That's why I wasn't shocked with Beckham at all. I just think Beckham was probably like, hey, looks like the Jets offer is the best. And he got a call, and it's like, that's what happens. Well, I don't blame him at all.
Remember a couple of weeks ago when there was talk about him signing a couple different places and the offers were like in the $5 million range. He basically said, I ain't taking no $5 million. So he was out to make the most money for the most years that he possibly could.
Well, it's only 1 year.
Right. It's only 1 year. So there's no guarantees. And remember, he was looking for multi-year deals last year at the end of the season coming off the ACL. And he wouldn't have even been able to play based on the health of his knees. So, yeah, I don't blame him, because like Kevin said, they don't have guaranteed contracts and they need to get as much money as they possibly can. But now, Russ, apparently all the focus on wide receivers turns to DeAndre Hopkins, and that's
let him go somewhere other than New York too, because he's another guy with a lot of mileage on him. Yeah. And let some other team, pay him $15 million. I don't want the Jets to do it.
I don't have a problem with the Bills trading for him, but the supposed demand was a second-round pick, and when you get Brandon Cooks for a fifth or sixth, screw giving up a second-round pick for a guy who's 31 years old, and no matter how great he is, he's got a lot of mileage on him. So, yeah.
We'll see.
I want to run something by you guys just for something I'm doing. It occurred to me, and maybe you guys can come up with other examples, but I was thinking in journalism, it's possible for you to go to college and join your college newspaper as a freshman. You could go in day one.
Right.
Is there any other profession where they let you get hands-on experience on your very first day of class? Doctors don't get to see patients.
Yes, actually. So
lawyers
and hotel restaurant management, you could do that. Like I went to this Conrad Hilton School of Hotel Restaurant Management. They had their own hotel. You could have been working in that hotel while you were going to classes.
But that's a specialized college, right?
Well, so what are you talking about? Just any old college?
I'm just talking about like Eastern Michigan University, where I went.
Kevin, you step in as a freshman and you can write for your college newspaper, or you're automatically allowed to, or
I believe you could do this with any hotel or restaurant in the field, especially if you're working. Like if you're going to college and you're working, everybody was working in the service.
Isn't there some kind of tryout process, Kevin? I mean, isn't there some sort of
Well, they have editors. Like if
right.
if the person writes is crap, then it's not going to get in a newspaper.
No, but I mean, like at Temple, when I went to college, I went in for the first year, and I was competing against like 10 other people, and there were 3 spots, that kind of thing.
Oh no, well, I was not unaware of that. That's why I wanted to bring it up, see if that was possible. So
I mean, I never got on the air because I switched majors, but I do know that when I was going into broadcasting at Buffalo State, they have a college radio station, and I do know the people that were in the major that I was in ended up on the radio. Now I don't know if like everybody did, because there's only a certain amount of airtime, but there is, if you show talent, then you could go on there. So, and I'm sure.
I guess there's a difference in like anybody could submit to the paper at any time. They would take submissions, but as far as working on the paper, you had, at least in my school, there was a tryout. Like
well, I'm sure like that's probably, don't you think that's the case too at like Northwestern or Missouri or some of the big journalism schools?
I mean, there was no tryout for this show, but I guess for other businesses there are.
That's not true, Russ. You beat out several people. Mike, however, just gratified him because he's been here forever.
Yeah. Okay. I have one little thing, and it's a pet peeve, and of course, it's centered around the team that I cover, but it's involving the NHL in general. So, and I don't know specifically the day, but a couple weeks ago, the Edmonton.
Should we start the show, Mike, first? Should we start the show since it's hockey related? Is that good?
Yeah, it's hockey related, so we can do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's start.
Hello, Hockey World. That guy out there always puts the time, Hello, Hockey World. It's Monday, April 10th, 2023.
I'm Michael Agello, and the start time is 6 minutes and 42 seconds for the guy who puts the time all the time.
I'm just going from Sportsology, and I always know what year I'm in.
Yeah, I'm Kevin Allen, and at some point your doctor's going to ask you that, and it's going to have an impact on your score. So,
man, woman, airplane, car. I agree. I completely. I do agree. And but what? This is what happens to me is not that necessarily. Anyway, I'm Macklin. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday. I'm not going to explain myself.
I feel like trying travels, and this is what screws them up year-wise. I feel like
I have not been here for a week. It's really nice to see you folks, despite being mocked as expected, but that's okay. I'm good with that. I actually looked at the time so much that I got confused whether in the intro I said the time or the year. That's what happened with me. I was like about to say, and it's 1:11. But anyway.
What's the deal about the time? This is all news.
Well, there's a guy in our chat on our comments thread that every show will put the timestamp of the minutes and seconds into the show that we actually do the introduction.
He's a pre-show hater, so
he hates the pre-show. He
wants to skip.
I think it's a great service. I appreciate you guys doing. I appreciate you doing it because pre-show maybe is not for everybody. That's totally fine. It just kind of gets us warmed up and gets us talking. And
but you can live without the pre-show.
I could live without the pre-show too, but I think that I would like to do a post-show, but that's neither here nor there. But the reality is,
post-show, I'm good with that too.
Russ comes up with great pre-show stuff all the time.
No, it's tradition. Screw that guy. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I kind of like it because it gets us warmed up a little bit. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Now
I'm back, and I'm really happy to be back. I got so much to talk about, obviously, with you guys.
Well, let me just get this thing through.
Mike first has a beef, which is like
okay. So
a great way to start the week. Mike's beef.
So a couple weeks ago, in an Edmonton Oilers game, they had apparently signed either an or they had an ATO, a goaltender on ATO, or an E-Bug, and he was the backup for their starter. And the game was one-sided, and in the third period, with about 3 or 4 minutes left to go in the third period, they put this kid in. I think he might have been a university goaltender or something like that. So they put him in, and I heard nothing but, "Oh, that's so great that they gave this kid an opportunity to play in an NHL game." And I agree. I like that kind of stuff. Okay, so and it's great. So in the Leafs-Canadiens game on Saturday, the Leafs, because of cap constraints, had to sign a University of Toronto goaltender named Jet Alexander. He was on the bench behind Ilya Samsonov, and it looked like he might have had to go in the game because Samsonov tweaked a knee, but he was fine. And he stayed in the game with about 3 minutes or 2 minutes left to go in the third period. Up 7-1, the Leafs put Jet Alexander in the game. The crowd cheered. And, their immediate reaction was, "Oh, this is great." The same thing. This is his moment in the 15 minutes of glory, blah, 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 blah. After the game, a certain segment, and I will say, of Montreal fans started saying, this was disrespectful to the Habs that they put in a university goal. I mean, there was a social media backlash against the Maple Leafs for that, plus late in the third period, they put up 6-1. They put their first power play out there. Yeah. And that's like a cardinal sin, to the point that Chris Weidman, the Canadiens defenseman, after the game was sort of pissed off at the Leafs and said, well, in a couple weeks, they're going to get what they deserve. I just love the reaction that the Leafs get as opposed to other teams in the NHL. There was no problem with the Edmonton goaltender, but because it's Toronto, it's like it's a cardinal sin.
I saw people going after Edmonton too, Mike. I mean, I did not. I did. I spent a lot of time on social media and a lot of time in waiting rooms and things like that. That was just the past week. I spent a lot of time reading Twitter. I mean, there were definitely a lot of people who went after them. But listen, I don't have a problem with it either, although maybe I'm getting old, but part of me did have a little problem with it, like the goalie, trying to play the goalie in. First of all, it was interesting that Sheldon Keefe said it wasn't his decision and never elaborated on whose decision it was that I heard of, right? Like
he was talking. That was before the game.
No, he was interviewed after the game. Why did you put it in?
No, I know, but the not his decision was before the game, because because Matt Murray was still injured. He was supposed to.
He said specifically, Mike. I maybe I'm wrong.
No, it was before the game. I know.
Okay, because I heard him ask specifically, what was your thinking of putting that guy in? And he said it wasn't my decision. He laughed, and they said whose decision was, and he said I won't tell you. Am I missing? Was that out of context?
I didn't hear that, but I know that before the game, the whole thing about them bringing in a goalie on an ATO. The talk about Matt Murray, he said it was not his decision, or they had to find out from the medical staff whether he'd be available. And once they found out he wasn't available because of this head injury, then they had to sign Alexander. I mean, it could have been Ilya Samsonov's decision to let the kid go in.
Here's my idea about it. I don't have a problem with it, but I think if you wanted to just end this all, you could basically let the teams all hire a guy who is their emergency goalie and let them be a part of like the game day staff or whatever. Right. And every team has one, and that person's just always in the crowd or always, up in the press box. And
I'm open to this job, Russ. If you want anybody up here.
I mean, last season, Alexander took to the ice as a member of the Colorado Avalanche because he was the standby e-bug for Toronto. So Kev, I mean, maybe I'm, as usual, maybe I'm making too much of it. I just love how in one instance there was little or no criticism, and in this one it's like somebody spit on the mother's grave or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like what teachers are taught to do, or parents usually do, is say in these circumstances, is this a big problem or a small problem?
Right.
That's what you tell your kids, and that's what I would tell you on this. This is a pretty small problem. Yes. I actually agree with Russ, though. If you want to just make it more standardized, just hire a guy that has some experience that you bring.
Right? He's at all home games.
Yeah, and he can be the practice goalie when someone's hurt, and you pay him, whatever it is a year, $40,000 or $50,000 a year, and have the guy in order to.
8 in the morning. If you have an injured player, let him shoot on that guy.
Right. Yeah. So, but I saw some reaction to it, but I mean, I just thought, it's just what some people do, so.
Yeah, I think it gained more momentum because it was Montreal, Toronto, and Weidman mentioned it after the game, and it's like, okay, you don't want to lose 7-1 and you don't want to be embarrassed. Play better, okay?
Right. Yeah,
that's the way you solve it.
I just never get worked up by all these things, I mean, I thought Weidman's reaction was over the top, like who cares?
Yeah, I mean, so guys like this guy and then David Ayres, they get put into the list of all-time players that play in the NHL, right?
Yes, they get put on hockey.
They get put in that list. That's the one thing I have a little bit of. I don't know, because to me, it's such an incredible journey to get to the NHL. I wish there was a spot David Ayres played a legitimate game, he played a game. He had to play.
I was at the game. He played over.
He had to play. He played a game.
He played over.
Put him with 10 seconds left as an e-bug. That to me is not. Does that person?
So maybe you have a thing where it needs to be like a complete game for a goalie. Like they have to play 2 periods or they don't get in the
Something
record.
like that, like I don't know, but
We're getting carried away here.
we are, Kevin. We are. That's why I think maybe I'm getting old. Like I'm like thinking like maybe.
Yeah, you might be on this. Like
I don't mind it, but I would be okay if they came up with a rule that said, hey, if the guy doesn't play at least 2 periods, maybe he shouldn't be in the record book. I don't care either way, though. I don't.
Or like something like he was a little asterisk.
What do you want to deny this guy a chance to, be able to something to tell his grandkids? Like, what's the big deal?
Oh, I think it's amazing. I don't know. I guess it just so many people who work hard. I don't know. Maybe I'm becoming old.
I think you're overthinking it. You know what I mean?
Big deal here was that the Habs perceived it as the Leafs rubbing it in their face.
We're past that, Mike. It doesn't.
Yeah, we're not talking about that. We're just talking about why we're trying to deny a guy playing 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So
I think that stuff is stupid. I agree, Mike. I think the people that's just people internet muscles, which are beer muscles. Like you're on the internet, you can say whatever you want because you're drunken on the internet and no one can track you down and beat you up. But beer muscles. So speaking of the vagueness, the NHL.com today has one of the articles. When you look down their sides of things, the sides of their articles for the day, they're like pretty good. Obviously McKinnon of Avalanche leads 3 stars of the week. That might have just happened seconds ago, but he did. Bruins add win record. We're going to talk about that. Mm-hmm. And that says Panthers can clinch tonight. Yep. Is a final thing. Now they can, but it's not like that simple. Because when you look it up as to see how they can clinch tonight, it would require the Islanders to lose to the Capitals, which doesn't feel likely to happen. Well,
it's the Islanders. They can clinch.
Actually, the way it looks like the destiny's in their own hands. But for the Florida Panthers, it's actually not completely in their own. I mean, it is in their own hands. If Florida wins both of their last 2 games, but their games aren't easy. They play Toronto tonight.
Yeah, but they have to put that in there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a clinching scenario. I would say clinching scenarios more than I don't know. Again, I've been away for weeks. Maybe I'm just nitpicking.
Well, first of all, Toronto has nothing to play for. They're home and cooled out.
Playing well.
No, they have nothing to play for, Ak. They're locked into second place. Right now, the only thing they want to do is prevent players from getting hurt.
No, but you do. But yes, you do. But you still, as a team, want to have a good feeling going into the playoffs.
Sure.
And you have Tavares on that team. Tavares has friends on the Islanders. He's sitting there and saying, okay, if the Panthers lose tonight, then the Islanders will their fate.
As a guy who's written this story many times over the career, I mean, players just don't think like that.
Right.
Yeah. They're just playing a game. They're not, and the coach takes some guys out, and like coaches and GMs think about that, but players don't.
Right.
They don't think like that. So they just go out, and if they're playing a game, they're trying to win it. They're not thinking about, we don't have anything to play for or any of that. It's
unless Mike they're scratching Marner and everybody like that. They're scratching Matthews.
They may tomorrow night against Tampa.
Tomorrow night, but not tonight. I think they're going to, as far as I can tell so far, they're playing their regular lineup, right? Which is
they're not skating today, so nobody knows what their lineup is.
Okay, that does matter, obviously, Kevin, right?
But we talk about that, but on the other hand, last night when Boston clinched that record, Bergeron didn't play, Krejci didn't play, McAvoy didn't play, Taylor Hall didn't play, Orlov didn't play, and Allmark didn't play. Now, that's as significant as any group that they're going to take out to rest on that day, and they still won that game.
And what's funny about that? Like, I knew they weren't playing, and I was kind of mad they weren't playing because of the reason as we'll get to in a second of and we should just get to it now because we talk about the clinch scenarios again at the end. But the Bruins set a record for the 63rd win in a regular season, which is impressive. And also, I thought especially impressive that they did it in their 80th game because that matches up against the other teams who had 80 games, who were in that list. I went through that list and I thought that it's the best. The Red Wings had the previous record of 62, and that was in 82 games. I didn't go back and look and see if they won those last 2 games or not, Kevin, or what happened there. I didn't go back to that season, but I like the fact the Bruins record was done in 80 games. I think that makes it more impressive. To me, it does at least. I don't know.
The only thing, Eck, and this was talked about in the press box. A bunch of us had a problem with Tortorella only playing 5 defensemen, and he just decided he didn't want to play D'Angelo. He didn't play him, and then there was a couple of minutes where Provorov got hurt and they weren't sure if he was coming back, but he did. So there was 4 defensemen, and there is a thing where if you want a team to set a record legitimately, you should at least have a full roster. And the fact that he didn't have a full roster, which was their choice not to have a full roster, was rubbing some people the wrong way. And I don't blame him. I kind of
I don't think that matters to him at all, because I think what Tortorella's trying to do is set up the whole environment for next year, right? So he's doing the whole thing of like, D'Angelo did something they didn't deserve.
Right, but you have to do things in accordance with the league sometimes too, and you should play a full lineup when another team's trying to set a record for the league. Like, you really should.
Well, you should, but it doesn't diminish what Boston did. They had no control over that. They got to play.
Control over it. Yeah, and like Kevin said, they scratched everybody they could.
But I can tell you that never used to be the way in the NHL, because someone told me a story where, and I forget which team was going to set a record, and the commissioner called that other team and said, "You're playing all your players, right? You're playing your starting lineup, right?" And so that wasn't always the case.
That's tampering. I'm
sorry.
They
don't.
That's how they did it back in the day, Mike.
Yeah, but that's not how they do it now.
Let's take out all that stuff for a second. And
that's like Paul Tagliabue calling the Giants when the Patriots, or was it Goodell at that point, calling the Giants to tell them, you've got to play your full lineup against the Patriots because they're 15-0, even though you have no consequence in the game in terms of, and they tried.
I agree with that. You should play your full lineup.
No, you should do what's best for your team.
Well, actually,
Gary Bettman's been on record as saying that, by the way. So
okay, but there is an argument to be made. Now, I'm not going to ever come out in favor of having Tony DeAngelo in there, but is it better for your team to be a player short? Because for a little while there were 2 players short.
Right. I can say
better. I know the argument is, how is that better for the team, Mike?
Russ, I can say this because I'm a reporter, and previous to that, a fan. If I was working for a National Hockey League team and the commissioner of the league called me up and said, "You've got to play all these players," I would tell him go spit. I would say, forget it.
Yeah.
I'm going to do what's important for my team. And if my team is in the playoffs and that game is meaningless, and I'm risking my best player or my second best player getting hurt in a meaningless game, and I can get fired because of it, then I am not taking any risks.
Okay, let me ask this one basic question. Shouldn't there be a league rule that says you have to field a full lineup every game?
It is in the preseason. I mean, you have to have certain levels of.
No, but even regular season, shouldn't that be a rule?
No. I don't know.
I mean, because we're in a salary cap league, I think you couldn't have that rule, because you could end up, and we have seen circumstances.
That's fair. The cap does affect that. That's a fair point.
I mean, you got to do all that, but I think the way, like, should Tortorella have tried to field, because it was an important game to the Bruins and for the league, should he try to? The answer is yes, but the fact he did it, he didn't field a proper lineup. Like, I don't think that diminishes whatsoever what occurred to that, because the Bruins have no control over that, and they had their own issues. They've had guys that are hurt, and they didn't have their proper lineup, and everything that makes the Bruins, they didn't have last night, and yet they found a way to to win that game and set a new standard. I mean, 63 wins in an 82 game schedule. I don't care who you're playing, is really remarkable.
One thing I'll say is they did kind of have that going, Kev, in the sense that Swayman and Ullmark have this relationship, and Swayman talked about it post game, that really is like split down the middle for them. Like, there really is no ego within their 2 goaltenders, and they really root for each other. They hug each other every game. And so, like, that is actually something that only happens in hockey. It really doesn't happen in any other sport. A lot of times in the NFL, the backup quarterback and the main quarterback don't like each other.
And I wouldn't be surprised if that continues in the playoffs. I would not be surprised if Ullmark and Swayman play. Not to say, I'm sure Ullmark will be the number 1 guy, but if he has a bad game, do you think that Montgomery is going to hesitate to go to Swayman? I don't.
I think Montgomery has confidence in both. He does.
He does, but they're going with Ullmark.
Yeah, they're going with Ullmark for sure.
Yeah, I mean, every team. I think it would have to be egregious,
right.
Or he'd move.
It has to be extremely egregious. I remember, like, the best teams in the league in history. Not all of them have won in the playoffs.
I'm going to bring up something that's never happened in this new building. And I really don't recall this ever happening in any building that I've ever gone to a game in the regular season. Of course, it happens in the playoffs. When the Boston fans had more fans there than the Rangers. That was obvious. Swayman was for cheers than Sandstrom. But with like 50-something seconds to go in the game, they were chanting, "We want the cup." And I
Bruins fans in the Wells Fargo Center.
In the Wells Fargo Center. And that was after Pasternak scored a hat trick, and there were a ton of hats. It wasn't just like a few from the opposing crowd. It was a ton. They had 5 people sweeping them. And then they did the "We want the cup" like a minute later. And I got to tell you that there were plenty of media members that were like, wow,
well,
we've never seen this before.
That's definitely a new low for that. I mean, that building we've seen, with Rangers, more Rangers fans than Flyers fans, now Bruins fans chanting "We want the cup." This is a season. This is an epic season. Maybe I mean, there's no getting around that. Now, I wanted to talk about who the best teams of all time in the regular season were, because it is kind of interesting to go through it. And I went through it today. And to me, there's a couple, obvious ones, right? Like, obviously, the Boston team has to be put up in there because they had the most wins in the regular season. And they also, the other thing, not lightly, because now remember, Tampa Bay in 18-19 had 62 wins and got beaten in the first round by the
by Columbus, yeah.
By Columbus, all right. But that Atlantic Division versus this Atlantic Division that the Bruins are in are not comparable either. Like, that Atlantic Division was way weaker than this Atlantic Division. This Atlantic Division the Bruins are in, 2 of the best 3 teams are playing. They're playing a bunch of times here in Tampa and Toronto. And other teams, Ottawa was much better. Detroit was much better. Boston played a much harder schedule, I think, than Tampa played back in 18-19. Now, the second team on this list, of course, Kevin, is the 95-96 Red Wings. What happened to them in the playoffs?
They lost.
They lost too, right?
Yeah, they didn't. They didn't win their first cup until '97. So
right.
They learned in that playoff. So
yeah, they learned. That was their learning playoff. But then there's the next 3 teams. After the 4, 5, and 6 teams are all Montreal Canadiens teams from the 76, 77, 77, 78, 75, 76 teams. Yep. They are all pretty remarkable. They're incredible teams. And these teams, like when you look at who's the best of all time, it's hard not to put the 76, the 76, 77 Montreal Canadiens as the best team of all time.
I still have a team that I think is better than.
All right, we'll get to that, but I want to go through some of these records because this is unbelievable stuff. Like what they did, of course, they only lost 8 regular season games. Okay, where Boston's lost 12. They had 12. Canadiens had 12 ties. They only played 80 games, but Montreal's only played 80 games right now, so it's comparable. But the other thing we've all been talking about, which I think is really remarkable, is we've been talking about this incredible Boston Bruins goal differential, which is like just astonishing, right? They are at 120, right? At 120 now. When we don't see 120s, in goal differentials ever. You guys, I'm assuming, didn't read my blog because why would you? But if you didn't, do you guys know what that goal differential was for the 75 or for the 76, 77 Montreal Canadiens?
It was over 200.
It was 216, Mike.
Yeah, I figured it would be.
Yeah, 216. That's nuts. And then if you go to 77, 78, it was 179, and in 75, 76 it was 161. The 95, 96 Red Wings was 144. So that actually was higher than this Bruins team.
Yeah, what's remarkable, just for people to put that into perspective, when it's 120, that means you start the game with a 1.5 to nothing lead.
Exactly.
And when the one it was over 200,
216 are almost at 3, Kev.
Yeah, almost a 3-0 lead when you start the game. So yeah, I'm not going to take anything away from the Bruins because what they did this season is really remarkable, and the fact that they had Wayne Gretzky, who's not prone to hyperbola, talking about it as amazing and what he saw this year. And they're, what I like about this Bruins team is they're all encompassing. Like they had great goaltending, they had stingy defense, and they had consistent depth forward. They had it all going on. But if you're asking me, like I think to me, what we're talking about, who's the most talented team, I think it's that Montreal 60-win team. Just in terms of the personnel, but more importantly too, the game was different then. Like, they had those 12 ties. Well, don't you think that talented group if we had overtime and shootout, would have won 8 of those games.
Would have won 8 of those games.
Yeah. No, so maybe more. Maybe more. Maybe
3-on-3 overtimes with that team.
Yeah,
I mean, that's just hard to imagine. Like,
I'm going to say that's the best team, but I don't like saying that because I am really impressed with this.
I'm not trying to take anything from Bruins either, but it's historical. It's worth looking at context. Like it's me, when you get here. I mean, the Oilers teams, which many people think of as being incredible, which they were.
The 83-84 Oilers would be my team. They had one player over 200 points. They had 4 other players over 100 points, and then Glenn Anderson had 99.
Yeah.
Right.
The only critique
they had 100. They were 120 goal differential as well. Russ, by the way.
The only critique I've ever heard of the 76-77 Canadians is the fact that the schedule back then was 8 teams within your division, and their division was probably the worst in the NHL because and I just looked it up. They had 2 teams that were at 500, the LA Kings and Pittsburgh. A team in year 2 of expansion, Washington and Detroit was particularly hideous that year.
Yeah, so, but they would have beat most teams though.
No, but I'm just saying
they were more
that padded.
Yeah, I'm not going to go there.
Mike just took that on
I will.
Montreal Canadiens.
I'm not going there.
Yeah, and I go back to whatever that show they used to have on years ago about when you'd have sports debates and someone would dismiss that argument as you can't control who you beat.
You play who's on your
schedule. So to discuss that seems ludicrous to me. The people in front of them that they beat weren't any good. Well, that's not their fault.
That Montreal Canadiens team, let's just go for a second. They scored 387 goals. Okay, so this Boston Bruins team, 291. That's not. But then that Edmonton Oilers team you're talking about, Russ, how many goals did they score? 446. Okay. They averaged 5.5 goals a game.
Yeah,
I mean, here's the thing about that team: they gave up 3.9 goals a game.
Of course, but it didn't matter.
They almost gave up 4 goals a game and still had that record. I mean, that was just an unbelievable.
But I mean, it is, and again, we're talking about regular season, so this doesn't factor into the argument. But you brought it up, Eck, and you're right on. Neither that Detroit team nor that. Tampa team, they didn't win. They didn't win the cup, and that Montreal team won that cup.
And the next 3, I think, or whatever it was.
It was 4 in a row for them.
That was the second, I think, of their. No, that was their first win in a row. And
that was the second one. 76, they beat Philadelphia.
Yeah,
I remember they swept Philadelphia, who had just won 2 Stanley Cups.
Last one for that team.
Yes. They had just won 2 Flyers had just won 2 Stanley Cups. We're like the whole league was up in arms because bullies were winning and everything was terrible, and you could just win by fighting. Even though Bernie Perrant was the reason they were winning those Stanley Cups, not that they were fighting. Bernie Perrant was the reason.
I'll tell Dale Rolfe that. But anyhow, go ahead.
But this Montreal team came on the scene at that point where everybody was just all about fighting. And there was a whole thing, and Larry Robinson basically, I saw an interview one time. He just said, "We're going to kill this evil. Like, we are better than this." And
he went out and beat the crap out of Dave Schultz, and that was it.
It wasn't like Larry Robinson.
The Montreal Canadiens were so fast that the Flyers couldn't touch them. The Flyers couldn't get close to them because of the speed of the Canadiens. And I remember at the time, this is how good the Canadiens were back then. I remember at the time, and I was only 8 years old when I was 7 years old when the Flyers won their first Stanley Cup, I think. I was 6 when the Flyers won their first Stanley Cup. I remember at that time being thankful that the Flyers didn't play the Canadiens in the playoffs either of those 2 years that they won the Stanley Cup. Like, the Canadiens were knocked out by somebody else. Remember, the Flyers beat the Bruins and the Sabres in the Stanley Cup final. And then the next year, the Flyers played the Canadiens in the Stanley Cup finals and got swept. But that's how good that team was even in 75. Even like back then, they were killing the Flyers.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I'll give the Bruins credit for is goaltending is better now around the league. And so it is hard to get these wins. It is.
Yeah.
That's true. Now, the Pittsburgh Penguins teams, the best Pittsburgh Penguins team, I think, when I was looking through this, was like the 92-93 Penguins, I would say.
Yeah, the one with Francis and
91-92.
Yeah, I mean, 92-93 won 56 games. And they're 14th on the list. That's the highest any Penguins team is on the list.
Right, but they lost.
They lost too.
Right.
Yeah. And their goal differential was only plus 98, which I say only plus 98.
Wasn't that the year that Lemieux broke his wrist? Wasn't that the year that Adam
Graves broke his wrist, and everybody in Pittsburgh hated Adam Graves forever because of that.
Yeah. And the other thing that I can't help but look at when I look at this list is my theory that parity is dead in the NHL, which I've been talking about forever. Like the NHL is always so proud of its parity. I think parity is absolutely dead, and I'll tell you why. Team number 1, 2020. Team number 1 with the most wins, 2022, 23. Team number 2, 95, 96. Team number 3, 18, 19, 2000, of course. Team number 7, 05, 06. Team number 8, 21, 22, last year's Panthers. Team number 12, the Capitals of 15, 16. 13, the Avalanche of 21, 22. I mean, these are, and then the 15 is the Capitals of 16, 17. So you're talking about a lot of teams in this top 20, and the Red Wings of 2007, 8 is not, or 19. So that's at least, I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
The only hard part of this argument is that still it's a low percentage of President Cup winners that actually win the cup.
Oh no, and that's a whole other story. That's a whole other thing. I mean, I want to go through this list and see who did win the cup on this list, because we know that Detroit didn't in 95, 96. Tampa didn't in 18, 19. Montreal did in 76, 77. Montreal did in 77, 78. Montreal did in 75, 76. Those three. The Red Wings 05, 06. Kevin?
No.
No, right? Pitt, they lost the Penguins, right?
No. That was the year before. They won in what, 08 and 09, or they were in the finals.
That was before Marian Hossa started getting traded.
They were in the finals and won in 08. They lost in 7 games in 09.
This is 05, 06, right? The Panthers 21, 22 out second round last year. We all remember that. Bruins of 70, 71, I think did win.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
No, the Canadians did. It was Bruins won in 70 and 72. So it was the Canadians in 71.
Yeah, 72. I remember.
All right, so then the Edmonton Oilers of 83, 84, they won.
Yes.
We're looking at only four of the top 10 teams that they're on the best records of all time have won the Stanley Cup. Only 4 of them. 3 of them being the same team. Montreal from 75, basically, I mean, from 76, 75 to 78. That's the same team. The 3 of them, but the only other one is Edmonton at number 10.
But that's long been NHL tradition.
Yeah, right.
Forever that it's the second season that there are 2 separate seasons. And
yeah.
Style of play is different. Everything is different. So
that brings me to the question: are the Boston Bruins going to win the Stanley Cup?
Well, what does the Buzztron say?
I'm not going to tell you yet because that's a secret. The Buzztron is kicking ass while we were away, by the way. And the most upsetting thing about not being able to do the podcast is not being able to brag about it. We'll brag about it going 18-4 last weekend, for example. Just things like that. I haven't been able to talk about it. But yes, the Buzztron is.
What's the reports? This is unsubstantiated.
It's not unsubstantiated. It's on my blog every day. It's completely 100% there. I put the pick. I put what happened the day before. Well, 163 wins, 101 losses on the season.
I think the Bruins will make it to the conference final. That's what I'll say.
Conference final?
Yeah.
No Stanley Cup.
I don't know.
Well, none of us know.
No, but I don't know how I feel about it yet. I need to see who is actually going to be in the playoffs first.
Right.
Go ahead, Kev.
Well, I think that's fair what Russ is saying, because right now, you're starting to wonder, the injuries of these players, how long are they going to be out?
Right.
If you're going to take, it's one thing to win one game to get your 63rd win without Charlie McAvoy and Bergeron, but if they're out for an extended period and you're trying to win, series, that's a whole different ball of wax.
And McAvoy was injured by his own player. Him and Bergeron collided in the game against Toronto.
I need to see who clinches the Metro. That's up in the air.
Okay, let's just say this. I think a lot depends in terms of Boston, what happens in the first round series between Tampa and Toronto, because if Tampa plays them, I think Tampa has a chance of beating Boston. If it's Toronto, I don't think Toronto will beat them. I think Toronto might obviously be satisfied if they've beaten Tampa. That's their Stanley Cup right now, is winning one round. It's sad to say, but I do think that's that's reality. Not to say that they wouldn't want to beat Boston, but I think Boston has a level of confidence over Toronto that they don't have over Tampa.
I mean they have 2 goalies. Either goalie can beat you.
Go ahead. Sorry.
They've got a lot of players. The depth on defense is just ridiculous.
I know.
It's ridiculous. It's better than the depth on defense is better than any team in the league, even though Carolina may have the best defense, but their depth on defense is unbelievable.
Oh yeah, no question about that. I mean, now for Toronto to get to the conference finals, they're going to have to defeat their demons along the way, Mike. And that's like the reality is.
Tampa, I know. I'm just saying. I don't think they're going to be able. I think they have a chance to beat Tampa, but I think Tampa is. We've covered this territory, and we'll talk about this before the playoffs. Yeah. I'm just saying, for Boston to go far, it obviously matters who they play. Sometimes it's when they won in 2011, their toughest series might have been the first round series against Montreal that they won in Game 7 in overtime. They went to Game 7 against Vancouver in the Stanley Cup final, but I think that Montreal series propelled them to winning the cup because they came this close to being out after one.
And that was exercising a demon for them.
Yes.
Even though it's cliche, Montgomery did say last night that all season long his team has sort of been in the now, in the present. So when someone asked, do they talk about the cup? He goes, no. They're talking about Game 1 of the playoffs. That's what they're actually talking about.
Right. Now, I mean, that makes total sense. And, going into this playoff race, which we'll get to in a second, that I think is just absolutely fascinating. Like, I think this wild card race is still wide open. Like, it's still, at this point, we still have teams. I mean, besides Seattle clinching the one spot over there, we have 3 teams that could get it in there and still have actually, 6 teams that could make the 2 positions in the East?
Yeah.
No.
Well, are you counting the Metro Division too? Not just it's not 6 teams for the.
No, so I'm talking about the battle for the playoff spot is what 4 teams. I'm sorry, 4 teams, right?
4 teams for that, but still, like as an example, the Rangers could still win the Metro. Like that's how crazy the Metro still is.
Buffalo is still mathematically in, but they're not in. I mean, 4 games in 5 days, and it's the way they explained it on Buffalo radio this morning. Florida and the Islanders would have to lose out and not get more than 2 points.
Right. Well, yes, you're right. I mean, it's really interesting because the schedule left remember we were talking about when the race was coming down the stretch. The schedule was all the Panthers had an easy schedule. Everybody had the Panthers had the easiest schedule getting there. But now with the last 2 games of the season, they have the hardest. They've got Toronto and Carolina, and Carolina is a historically bad Panthers rivalry. Like they have not been good against Carolina at all. Even back when they were in the same division,
But Carolina's not the same. Like I'm willing to say that right now, they're not the same.
I agree.
But they're, and yes, and that's one of the Buzztron's issues is like sometimes the teams just aren't the same, right? And when I'm predicting these things, but as of now, what has happening is the Buzztron, and I'll bring it up, has the Islanders at 95 getting the 7th spot. That means they're going to win their last 2 games, which are highly possible. I looked at this. I had the schedule the other day up there. I can bring it up right now, actually.
But if Florida wins tonight, that can't happen.
No, it can. It can. Because if Florida wins tonight, let's look at what this current standings
I would
are.
give them 93 points. All they would need is a point then, and they beat the tiebreaker.
All they would need is a point, but they still have to get a point.
I know, but it would beat I mean, what are the odds they're not going to get a point then in the next one
against Carolina? It's possible.
Of course, it's possible, but
no, but the Panthers. I mean,
I think the odds are against the Islanders being in the 7th spot for sure.
Well, if the Islanders win both of their games and the Penguins win both of their games, they're 7th and 8th, unless the Panthers win both of their games. Now, the Panthers have, like I said, they've got to get 4 points or 3 points out of Toronto and Carolina in 2 games.
You're stuck on who they're playing, but I'm just talking points and math. That's all
I know, but I mean, it's like to assume that they're going to get 3 points out of those 2 games.
Alex Lyon's beating everybody that he's lining up against.
He's starting to do that.
I not believe in him now.
But no, I mean, I'm just saying that they've won a bunch of games. They've been dominant for sure. And I think that the Panthers make the playoffs and play the Bruins in the first round, for example. Maybe they pick the Bruins if, say, the Penguins win both their games, or and end up ahead of them. Then I'm sorry, if the Penguins win both. Then then I'm wondering if the Florida, I'm wondering about the Bruins and the Panthers, 2 of the top, 10 best records of all time. Last year Panthers, this year's Bruins, playing each other in the first round. That's a tough series for Boston, I think.
Okay, Florida is not the same team, Mac.
No, but they also have the goalie who took out Tampa.
They're not the same team.
If that's the first series, I'm taking Boston every time.
Yes.
Well, everyone's going to take Boston over whoever they play.
No, that's not necessarily true. But I would
If you
take
look at those.
those.
Okay, let's just pretend for a second. Let's go in the top in the four teams Boston can play. Who has the best shot at knocking them out?
The Islanders. The Islanders.
You think the Islanders?
Because of Sorokin.
So we're looking at Penguins, Islanders,
Panthers, and Sabres.
Yeah. Right, Kevin. Who's got the best shot at knocking them out?
I agree with Mike. I'm going with the goalie, Sorokin.
Okay, Sorokin. Yeah. No,
I'm going with the Penguins because of their playoff experience and the stars that they have. They might be able to pull something on the Bruins because they're pretty crafty still.
And if Jari could find it, then
if he just plays decently,
right,
they still could be trouble for a round at least.
I mean, whenever you can play against Crosby in a playoff series, it's dangerous. I mean, it's just dangerous. It is. He almost did the Rangers.
Nothing else. Crosby could neutralize Bergeron, and then what does that do? Then that does change things a little bit.
And then it's Malkin against Krejci.
Right.
What does Sabres Bruins series look like, Kevin? Just out of curiosity.
I think it would be 4-0.
4-0 quickly.
Yeah. I mean, they just don't have the defensive chops, goaltending to deal with it. They might get some goals, but
it would be the Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey circus. That's what it would be because and we started to talk about this last week, and there was a game, and Kev, you saw it, the Sabres and the Detroit Red Wings, the 7-6 shootout game that the Sabres won. And that is exhibit A of why the Sabres cannot go with Devin Levi as their number one goaltender next year, because if they're going to play that kind of crappy defense in front of a 21-year-old kid, they're going to burn him out. It's dumb. Now, they have to improve defensively to make the playoffs, but they also have to get themselves another goaltender. If you want to play Levi 30 or 40 games, fine. But I don't think you can play that kid 60 games and expect him to not get burned out because that team can't play defense well enough.
Yeah, and I don't think he's ready either.
No.
If you watch that game, he was playing on reflexes and he was caught out of position a couple of times. And so he's a talented player. There's no doubt.
Yeah, very much so.
But, you got to go out and get a veteran next year and try to do that. And, it's going to be interesting to see, what their options are. In the offseason, we've talked about this before as well. Just, I'm still hearing the same buzz that people just don't see the goaltending class as very attractive.
Right.
And it will be less attractive if Gibson is not traded.
True. So, I do want to answer the chat room. Earl said nobody said Rangers could beat Boston. We don't expect the Rangers to match up against Boston.
No, we're talking about Rangers are going to. Well, not in the first round, at least. No,
right. That's why.
That's not going to happen. I mean, the Rangers, Devils, Carolina is still, like you said, very much in hanging out there.
It's up in the air now.
What happens there? I think that the wildcard teams are probably pulling for Carolina to get that spot. Like, I think that they're going to look at Carolina and say, okay, they're missing Special Cup. They have a history of kind of falling apart in the playoffs. I would not want to, I would want Carolina, if you're one of those wildcard teams, to win that.
Well, we have to talk a little bit about the West. We have to talk a little bit about the West because
let's talk a lot about it because it's still
with Winnipeg, Calgary, and I just can't believe Nashville has stuck around with nobody being
stuck around, Mike. If Nashville beats Winnipeg the other day, they're in the driver's seat. That game was
they've stuck around with nobody. That roster has been decimated either by injury or by players being traded away, and it's been miraculous that they've stuck around.
For sure. But this is the Predators' way, right? I mean, this is what they do. This is that team is historic for this.
Yeah. What's interesting about this race, to me, what seems different is we're looking at the East because we think there's some potential there of an upset coming from the wild card.
Yeah.
I see no potential for an upset. We're just trying to figure out who the first round fodder is.
Right.
Am I wrong on that? But I just don't.
Right. I mean, doesn't feel like the Islanders, Penguins, and Panthers are all should be.
I don't know. They're dangerous. They're dangerous. I don't know that they are going to do it, but they look dangerous. And those teams in the West, they don't feel dangerous to me.
I agree. Depending on the injury situation with Colorado, because there's still a lot of question about Landeskog and about Makar. Yeah, I think them playing, and right now they would play Seattle. I think Seattle would be fodder for Colorado. Vegas has had their ups and downs this year. The goaltending has been spotty at times. We don't know who they're going to start in the playoffs. And then they could play Winnipeg or Calgary or Nashville.
I think Calgary's out, aren't they?
Right now they're out by a point. But I'm saying if we're doing the same,
right? I'm sorry. Because in the chat room they were saying Calgary's eliminated. I'm not sure. I didn't think
they're not eliminated.
They're not eliminated.
If Winnipeg gets 3 points in their remaining 3 games, they're the second. They're the second
right.
wild.
Right. That's what I thought.
And Winnipeg, Winnipeg. Even though they have not played well down the stretch, I still say, I use the same rule when it comes to Winnipeg that I do with the Islanders. Hellebuck is an equalizer. And if he gets hot or if he has a good series, they could beat Vegas. I think Vegas would be favored, but I think Winnipeg could win. I think Calgary could win if Markstrom got hot, but I don't know. I mean, they're definitely not as competitive as the wild cards in the East.
I'm kind of leaning. I like the way the Oilers are playing. Like I said, both goalies are playing well. They're rolling really well, and they are a different team. I do think they're different from the Oilers teams of the past that would just get dismissed, and I do think they can get to the conference final. I do.
In the other race that matters.
Any comment on that? I mean,
none.
Well, I'm with you. I mean, I think they're going to be the favorite in the West. People just feel good about how the Oilers are playing, and
yeah, I think they are. I think they're right there, and they seem to have it all together. I mean, McDavid is on a mission.
I'm picking LA in the first round.
Well,
that's a garbage.
I'm just saying they're on a mission. I mean, I think that. Yeah, I mean, as of now, that's really where they sit. They're on a mission.
You don't even believe that, and you're saying it.
I'm saying it, and I'm hoping it, and I believe it.
You're hoping it, but you don't believe it.
Despite the fact that Mike always talks about being a sports writer, he's still a fan at heart. He just can't remove himself. It's just,
just the glee and rubbing my hands with glee. Now,
he's just,
I like the Devils now, Mike. I hated them growing up, but I think they're a fun team. I'm into them.
The Devils are a fun team.
I don't mind.
I hated them growing up.
If there's anybody in this panel that would hate the Devils, if I was a pure fan, it would be the team that got limited in an elimination game to 6 shots by a Devils team that won a Stanley Cup. So it's like, I mean.
Oh, wait, you think growing up a Ranger fan, I should be a fan of the Devils? Like the way that team would beat the Rangers most years?
Or all the times the Flyers had a 3-1 series lead on the Devils and lost. Yeah. There were plenty of them. I mean, it's like, we're Scott Stevens on American Dress. Come on, there's moments, Mike.
Kevin has to drop off in a minute, but I just wanted to say the race for Connor Bedard is coming down to it, and Anaheim, Chicago, and Columbus. I mean, if Columbus could strip their team bare and play the Lake Erie Monsters the final 3 games, they would do it. But I know Anaheim got a point last night against Colorado, and that sort of hurts their chances because they got 58 points. The Blackhawks and Columbus have 56. I mean, I know it's percentage points, but the more chance you get to get closer to that guy, you take it.
Well, for sure, but I mean, still, if you win, you only got 18% chance. Like, right. Someone in Detroit was the same.
It's not a great difference.
No, I mean, somebody in Detroit was just saying the other day, anybody who thinks they've done great because they've got the best odds should call Steve Eisen.
Right.
Because, as he told his staff before all that started, expect that we're going to move down 2 because that's what the odds say,
Yeah. To me, if I were a GM, the only hoping I would be doing is I want to be in the top 4. If you get me in that top 4, I feel great.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and they all have shots. I mean, we've seen it. We've seen teams on the top 3 or make get it too. So it's like, all those bad teams have a shot.
Yeah, I mean, anybody that's in has got a shot for sure.
Yeah.
I gotta go, guys. We'll see you later.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks.
The one side note is,
I think if Seattle ends up playing Edmonton in the first round, or if Seattle ends up playing Colorado in the first round, however it plays out.
I did want to say this, Ek. The one side note is, and this is where this could be crazy for Columbus. If Columbus gets Bedard, Svozil is a teammate of Bedard's, and he's also, a drafted player from Columbus. So that would be a very interesting thing because they play together on the power play. That would be amazing, actually.
Okay, so let's just talk briefly about the Frozen Four Championship on Saturday. and some of the signings. Russ, I like again. Minnesota was up 2-1 in the third period against Quinnipiac. I thought they were sitting back trying to protect a 1-goal lead. When you do that, I think you're just begging that team to score the tying goal. They did, and then on a set play off the opening faceoff, they win the game. And I don't think
it's that easy though. Like I think there's a little bit of that what you're talking about, but if we take it back. Before the playoffs started, I picked Quinnipiac to beat Michigan. Well, why did I do that? Michigan has all this talent because, I get to see Quinnipiac during the regular season. I saw them in November, and I was like, wow, this team is unbelievable. They carried that through. I saw them barely beat Penn State, even though they won in dramatic fashion. And I was like, okay, that's a red flag for me. Rand Pecknold is a great coach. He's a great tactician. So, again, I think while you're saying that you thought Minnesota sat on it, Bob Motzko is not going to let his team sit on it for very much. I just think the difference in this game was everybody on Quinnipiac plays that system to the nth degree, and they never break from it, whether they're up or they're down. There's teams that a lot of times once they fall behind, they start drifting away from their system and get more desperate. Quinnipiac never got desperate. Even they were down 2-1, they never got desperate. They kept playing their game, and the thing was, when they tied it, I do think that was a moment where, again, Rand Pecknold could be the next great coach out there. Who knows if he'll ever leave? He created that whole program, and I've been talking about him for a week and a half now, just in the sense that I felt like he's tremendous and has a great impact on the players. I think he had the greatest impact on that game. Now, again, yeah, I talked about Sam Lipkin, who's an Arizona prospect, and he made that pass. Like, that was a tremendous pass. So it did happen. It was a set play. I don't think it's really Minnesota's fault. I think it's really that, hey, you know what? Quinnipiac was just better. They had more seniors, which is also another factor. I got almost a Union vibe out of Quinnipiac, but not to the point where I was picking Quinnipiac to win. I didn't. I thought Minnesota would win. And on Off the Post, I said, but I thought it would be a close game because I know a lot of people were thinking it could be a blowout just based on the first round talent that they had. But again, that doesn't always win. And so, yeah, I give the credit to Quinnipiac. I don't take anything away from Minnesota. And I do feel like their players wanted it more. Like there was a play that I had told Mike about. Zach Metza, who's a 5'9" defenseman, saw Matthew Nyes coming down on the wing, probably middle of the third period, maybe when they were even up 2-1. And he took him out of the play. 5'9" defenseman took Matthew Nyes, who's probably 6'1", 6'3", took him right out of the play.
Right.
So just some signing news. Brock Faber signs with Minnesota, and Matthew Nyes, the aforementioned Matthew Nyes, signed a deal with Toronto. He may play tonight. He may play tomorrow against Tampa. It's unsure yet.
Yeah, Luke Hughes may play in the next day or two.
Drew Comesso signed with the Blackhawks. And another goaltender, I forgot the name.
That's the goalie of the future, Drew Comesso. He was with the U.S. team. He'll take a few years, but that's their goalie. So, like, if they get Bedard and they have Comesso coming in a year or two, like, that's how the Blackhawks could get better quicker.
Yeah. I mean, Luke Hughes, apparently they're not going to – it sounds like they're not going to play him if the games are meaningful in the last couple of games of the season.
Yeah, I don't blame him because here's the thing about Luke Hughes, and this is the honest truth. He's a tremendous talent. He's a creative offensive defenseman who has pretty good stick work as far as defense. He's not really physical, but he does take chances in the middle of the ice, and at the levels that he's been at, he can get past that. You know what I mean? Like, he's better than everybody on the ice, and he can get past that. But if he does that in an NHL game, there's going to be one or two times in games, because it's been happening to him even at the college level, where he'll get victimized. And you don't really want that to happen to him yet, because he will be the most creative defenseman they have offensively, and just the best skating defenseman.
Yeah. And in the series against the Rangers, I don't
think, if there's an injury and they're down 3-0, fine, put him in. I get it. But otherwise, I would wait too.
Yeah, I would wait, especially. I mean, if they play Carolina or either team, you just know there's too much skill that he's never played against.
Yeah, but I would put him in one of the games. Like Vince said, put him in one of the regular season games. That's fine. Let him get you should let the Hughes brothers play and let them get the hype. I agree that that's fine to happen. I do.
Well, I think if they win their next game, they play on Tuesday and Thursday. If they win on Tuesday, they'll clinch home ice at least, right? So
Yeah.
that's and then if Thursday's game doesn't mean if you know you're in second place, and Carolina is trying to go. Remember, we were talking about the Carolina Panthers. You guys are talking about the Carolina Florida game. Carolina's going to go in for first place in that game. That's a big game for Carolina.
Yeah, I love the commentary like OSU in the chat who said Nyes is overrated byproduct of playing with Cooley and Snuggerud. He didn't play with Cooley and Snuggerud last year, and he had just as good a year. So you don't know.
No, I watched him. Look, I've watched Nyes for years in the USHL before he went to college. He's not overrated. He's just Logan Cooley is on a skill level that is on his own island. If you remember, there were some people that thought Logan Cooley had a chance to go first in his draft, even with Slavkovsky and Shane Wright. There were people that liked Cooley in that first spot for a little while. And you're seeing why, because he's an unbelievable player. That doesn't take away from Matthew Nyes.
No, they're two completely different players. I mean, you're talking about one who's going to be a center, who's probably going to be a number one center in the NHL, and the other one's a power forward. So
I had said, and I meant it, that Jackson Nelson, who's going to have a lot of suitors and scored a big goal. I got to tell you, if I'm the Flyers, I would have made sure I buddied up to him and tried to sign this kid. I don't know if they will. I don't know who's going to get him. But this kid has some talent, and he's a big kid, and he plays near the net on the power play, and he's got good hands.
Right.
Another signing, San Jose signed Magnus Krona, the goalie from the University of Denver. And one last thing here, Mark Stone is skating with the Vegas Golden Knights. Gee,
we knew that was going to happen.
Yes, $9.5 million buried on LTIR, and lo and behold, lay the healing hands, folks. He's
the same doctor that Kucherov went to. Yeah, same doctor that Taylor Hall has gone to. Like you're talking
about Ethan DeHong, who got a big empty netter for Quinnipiac, is done. Like he's 5 years. Some of these other guys that our teams are talking about, these guys would have to agree to leave the program, and they may not. But DeHong's done. And so I'm a team, I'm getting him because he has a winning mentality. He's not going to be a big scorer. He's a guy that can just do a lot of little things and skates well, and he's a good player. I think you'll see him get signed in the next week or two as well.
Yeah. Final question, Randy asks, do you think the Oilers can beat the Golden Knights?
I do.
I do too. I think it's gonna be great if Stone's back and healthy. It's a hell of a series. I mean,
listen, that could be the best series that we watch.
Yeah, I mean that's gonna be up there.
I don't because they won't be there because they'll lose to the Kings.
They're gonna finish in first place and not even play the game.
They're not gonna finish first.
Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. We'll be back again tomorrow to figure out what happens tonight. A lot of weird games tonight. Look at the Buzztron predictions for tonight all over the map. Kind of scared about tonight's predictions. We'll see you later. Have a good night.